Remember, trauma isn't the person. It's not the toxic person. It's not the narcissist. That's not the trauma. The trauma is how you feel and interpret that other person. That's the trauma. I'm not good enough. That's why they're behaving like this. That isn't true, but that is the trauma. So the beauty of that is you can heal that. You can work with that. Trauma doesn't have to be a life sentence. Do you ever feel like your face and voice is saying one thing, looking like you're okay, but you feel totally numb and disconnected in your body? This could be what we call dissociation, and it's really common when you're in toxic and abusive relationships. And it's exactly what we're talking about on today's episode. Hi everybody, welcome to the Trauma and Narcissism Redefined podcast. My name is Caroline Strawson and I am a somatic practitioner specialising in all things nervous system, body related, and of course, narcissism. It's my honour and pleasure to have you to listen to. I know there's lots and lots of other podcasts and YouTube channels out there. So I just want to say, if you're a new listener, a massive, massive welcome. It could be literally the start of an eye-opener into what you have experienced. And of course, if you're a regular listener, massive, massive welcome back. I'm always thrilled to have lots and lots of you message me too, whether it be on Instagram or email or anything else, because it's really great to hear from you and your feedback about the podcast too. So I want to talk about something that, again, I didn't even know about this stuff, because a lot of the stuff I share with you is stuff I always bang on and say, this should be taught in schools. And that is actually part of what I'm trying to do with my franchise and licensing company, the mental wellbeing company, of training people to be exceptional trauma coaches and then taking that work for individuals and also into schools and workplaces. Because the stuff that I then learned when I was trying to heal from just talking and it wasn't working, I believe the stuff then that I learned and I am now trained in should be in schools. It should be available in our healthcare systems, but we still live in quite an archaic system where we only think talking about our problems is what's going to help. And actually we know slightly differently now with neuroscience and the somatic element of it. We need to work from the bottom up, so the nervous system upwards, not just the brain down. We have to have a combination of both to really, really heal. And that often doesn't happen in healthcare settings. So dissociation was a word, again, I'd kind of heard it before, but I didn't really know what it was, if I'm honest. And when I found out what it was like this light bulb of, oh my goodness, I've been in this state for decades. So dissociation is really common when you're in these long-term abusive relationships, because you disconnect from your body. So what does that actually mean? Well, it means when you're in a toxic abusive relationship and you're in it long term, their behavior is basically highlighting a core wound in yourself about what you feel about you. If you haven't listened to the last podcast on codependency, I really, really recommend you go and listen to that, because I talk a lot about, how we feel about ourselves and in our childhood, how we see things as always a reflection of ourselves. And this kind of creates a core emotional wound of things like, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy. And that becomes really our biggest danger to us, because the pain of feeling like that as a kid is super painful. So it's like our version of a lion or a tiger chasing us. Our system as human beings, we're set up for survival and to move away from pain. This is big pain for us. We need to survive. So our system is going to do everything it possibly can to move us away from that core pain of feeling not good enough. It's kind of stuck in our nervous system. We're stuck as a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, little boy or a little girl in our bodies. And everything is about moving us away from that. And dissociation starts to happen is if we perceive things as threatening or dangerous. So the narcissist is ripping the scab off that wound because they're treating us as if we're not good enough or we're not worthy on occasions. Then we will initially maybe go into a fight-flight response. So we'll mobilize more cortisol. We will mobilize that energy to either shout or slam a door or whatever that may be, the sympathetic response of that. But if we still perceive threat and danger, which is what happens in these relationships, we shift into what we call a freeze response. So our systems really go into shutdown. Our survival is really about our major organs, and we don't have any energy because we don't have that cortisol going to our limbs to kind of fight or to run away. So we feel exhausted. We feel like we don't want to get out of bed, or we feel like we're walking in treacle all of the time. It just feels really heavy because we don't have that energy. We're literally in survival mode and our body is saying, get small, hide away. That's the safest. It's not that you're giving up, it's just your system thinks that's the safest for you right now until it feels like it's safer to come out of that. Now, when we end up in this freeze response long term, this is when dissociation will start to kick in. The pain that we start to feel in our bodies from being in these relationships reminds us of pain that we felt as a child. So dissociation is really like a protector part for us, and it's what I work with clients with around internal family systems, which is a parts therapy. Dissociation is really a protector part of somebody to numb out that emotional pain that we feel in our body. So we might be saying things like, I am angry, I am sad. But there's this kind of disconnect. Have you ever taken any photos of yourself? I didn't really have many of me actually when my kids were younger. I was always behind the camera. You know, this was before, in some respects, mobile phones were so used and things like this. So I was always behind the camera because I felt fat, I felt ugly. So I wanted to take pictures of my kids, but I didn't want to be in the pictures. But on the rare few that I do have, I look at these pictures now and I think, I am smiling, you know, you can see I am smiling, but I look dead behind the eyes. There's a disconnect. There's a kind of sadness in all of that. Yeah, I'm still smiling and still saying, I'm fine, everything is okay. But of course it isn't okay. So this dissociation part of us comes in to numb out everything in our body, disconnect for us so we can still function. You know, I still had to get the kids ready for school and do their packed lunches, so I can still function, but actually I'm disconnected from that pain because it's too great to feel. And there can be different parts and layers to dissociation. One, it can feel like you're literally just disconnected from any emotions. Sometimes it can feel like you're almost having an out-of-body experience and you're looking down on yourself, kind of living your life too. And neither are right or wrong. Both are there to protect you from feeling that core pain. But what it leads to in the long term is a switch off, a disconnect, a numbness. It's hard to engage in social activities. And the worst is it can often lead to chronic illness. You know, when we're in these long-term survival responses, what happens is, and we're producing hormones in our body to stay safe, we start to live in an inflamed body, and that starts to lead to chronic illness. Things like autoimmune disorders, IBS, skin conditions. These are all inflammatory responses in our body because we've got really too much cortisol in our body, and it leads to that. And I listened to a podcast with Dr. Gabor Mate, who I was lucky enough to see a few weeks ago, actually. And he was saying, from a research perspective, 80% of autoimmune disorders are found in female people pleasers. So meaning we're internalizing because we don't want to say it externally for fear of retribution or what people might say. And we know that is absolutely the case in toxic narcissistic relationships because often the abuse could escalate. So we internalize all of that. That becomes really painful. So this dissociation part comes in, just going to numb you out then, just so you don't feel that. So many of us in these relationships, and even when we come out of these relationships, we're kind of in what we call a functional freeze state. We're dissociated, we're not feeling anything, but we're still functioning because we still have to maybe. We've got responsibilities, especially as if we're a parent. Actually, what we really want to do is curl up in a ball in our bed and put the duvet over our head. And again, that's not us giving up. That's our nervous system saying, stay safe, get small, and when it feels safe again, you can come back up. But that is often we're behaving like that lost, wounded child again because it's stuck in our system. So if we want to shift dissociation and not feel and reconnect with our body, reconnect with ourselves so we can start to live and feel very grounded and present and feel more joy and happiness, what we have to do then is start to bring a little bit of energy back into the body. And then we have to learn how to express and discharge healthy aggression and anger, because so often people are stuck in that freeze response. I call this the traffic lights of tolerance. They're in that red light, the freeze response. And as they start to move into the yellow light and we mobilize more energy again, because it's the fight flight response. So we feel like we could be really, really angry and really loud. We think people will think we're not in control. They're going to judge us. So we don't express it. Very often we might have moments of bursts of expressing it, but then we push it back down again because of fear of what others may think. And that pushes us back into freeze and we dissociate again. What we need to learn to do is as we shift into that yellow light, because we have to go in the yellow before we get to green, the presence, what we call ventral vagal part of our nervous system, we have to pass through that yellow light. So we have to learn how to express healthy anger. And again, this is a lot of the work that I do with my communities and my clients, because it's probably the hardest part to release the rage, to express healthy anger. We're not taught that, particularly women. We're not taught to express or show anger or anything like that, because that must mean we're a crazy lady, or worse still, get diagnosed with bipolar or borderline personality disorder, where actually it's just a natural physiological response to all the experiences that you have had. So for us to move from dissociation, we do have to express and discharge that sympathetic energy that's built up in our body, and we have to express it to then move back into that green light, the ventral vagal part of our nervous system, where we can feel present and grounded. So dissociation isn't a bad thing. It's your nervous system doing an amazing job for you. It's a protector part of you, but it's not a healthy place to keep on living your life, because there's no joy, there's no connection. It may look like it because you might have a little smile on your face and saying, I'm fine, but it's nowhere for you to live. This is why somatic healing, the nervous system stuff, all the work that I do is so vitally important, because I could go to a counseling session or go and see a psychologist and say all of the right things. I could be smiling and saying all the right things. I'm literally neck up, doing all the right things, totally in my head. But if I'm not feeling anything and I'm not given tools of how to feel again, because you can't talk your way out of dissociation and freeze, you have to feel to heal. If I'm going in, they're going to think, great, this is going really well in the sessions, because guess what? I'm a people pleaser and I'm going to say all the right things to you as my therapist, my counselor, my psychologist. So I'm going to say all the right things and they're going to think everything is hunky-dory. But the moment I'm walking out that door, I'm totally disconnected, numb, dissociated again. So we have to work in the body. And many, many people have this amazing protector part of dissociation, particularly in long-term toxic narcissistic relationships. It's there to protect you from feeling anything. It numbs you out. It disconnects you, but it's no way to keep on living your life. So let me know, drop me a message. Are you living in a state of dissociation? I hope you can now see that it has good intention for you. It's trying to keep you safe and minimize that core pain of what potentially you feel about yourself, because people around you are triggering that core wound. Remember, trauma isn't the person. It's not the toxic person. It's not the narcissist. That's not the trauma. The trauma is how you feel and interpret that other person. That's the trauma. I'm not good enough. That's why they're behaving like this. That isn't true, but that is the trauma. So the beauty of that is you can heal that. You can work with that. Trauma doesn't have to be a life sentence. So I hope this has been really helpful to you all, talking about dissociation, toxic relationships, narcissistic abuse. It's given you an insight into what many of us will go into a state of dissociation to protect ourselves. But I hope it's given you maybe a few pointers of how you can start to shift out of dissociation and your freeze response. So take care, look after yourself, and I will see you on the next episode.